The car's engine hummed low, a steady pulse against the silence of the Arizona desert stretching endlessly before us. I glanced at Ethan, my stepson, slouched in the passenger seat, his face half hidden by the hood of his sweatshirt. 19 years old, and he'd barely said 10 words since we left Phoenix 3 hours ago. Want some music? I offered, my voice rougher than I meant. Ethan shrugged, his gaze fixed on the blur of cacti outside. Something was eating at him, I could feel it, heavy as the heat pressing against the windows. We were on this road trip to scatter his mother's ashes, my wife of 10 years, who'd lost her battle with cancer 6 months ago. Sarah had been the glue between us, the one who knew how to bridge the gap between a gruff mechanic like me and a quiet kid like Ethan. Without her, we were two strangers sharing a car, a mission, and a grief too big for words. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under my calloused hands. You okay, kid? I asked, softer this time. Ethan's fingers twitched around the journal in his lapel-worn black notebook he'd been clutching like a lifeline since we packed up the house. I'm fine, Tom, he mumbled, but his voice cracked, betraying him. He wasn't fine. Not even close. The road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert's heart. We'd planned this trip for weeks, mapping out the places Sarah loved, the Grand Canyon, a quiet lake in Colorado, a meadow in Montana where she'd grown up. It was supposed to be a way to say goodbye, to honor her. But now, with Ethan's silence filling the car, it felt like something else entirely a reckoning I wasn't sure I was ready for. Ethan, I said, my voice steady but firm, if something's on your mind, you gotta tell me. We're stuck in this car for days. No point hiding it. He shifted, his sneakers scuffing the floorboard. For a moment, I thought he'd brush me off again. But then he turned, his brown eyes catching the fading sunlight, and I saw a flicker of fear, raw and unguarded. I'm gay, he said, the words tumbling out like they'd been trapped too long. I've known for years, but I never told Mom. And I didn't know how to tell you. The air in the car thickened, my pulse loud in my ears. I kept my eyes on the road, not because I was angry, but because I needed a second to process. Ethan was gay. My stepson, the kid I'd raised since he was 9, who'd helped me rebuild carburetors and snuck extra cookies when he thought I wasn't looking, was telling me his truth. And it hit me like a freight train. Say something, Ethan whispered, his voice small, like he was bracing for a blow. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I'm glad you told me, I managed, glancing at him. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he clutched that journal tighter. Why didn't you say anything sooner? He laughed, a bitter sound. Because I was scared, Tom. Mom was sick, and you were always working, and I didn't want to be one more thing you had to deal with. I didn't want you to hate me. Hate you. The word stung, sharp and unexpected. Ethan, you're my kid. I could never hate you. He looked away, his jaw tight. You say that now, but you don't know everything. The road curved ahead, and I eased off the gas, letting the car slow. Then tell me, I said. Tell me everything. He opened the journal, his fingers hesitating over the pages. It's all in here, he said. Stuff I couldn't say out loud. About me. About who I am. About someone I met. Someone. I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my tone light despite the knot in my chest. His name's Caleb, Ethan said, his voice softening, a faint smile breaking through. He's at college with me. He's important. I nodded, processing. Caleb. A name. A person. A piece of Ethan's life I'd known nothing about. Okay, I said. Tell me about him. Ethan's eyes lit up, but there was still that edge of fear. He's kind. Funny. He's studying art. Wants to be a painter. We met at a campus open mic night. I was reading poetry, and he got it. Got me. I could hear the love in his voice. The kind that makes you feel like the world's both bigger and smaller all at once. It reminded me of how I'd felt with Sarah, back when we were young and fearless. But there was something else in Ethan's tone, something heavy. There's more, isn't there? I asked, my gut telling me this wasn't just about coming out. Ethan nodded, his fingers tracing the journal's edge. Caleb's got problems. His family, they're not like you. They found out about us, and they cut him off. No money, no support. He's been crashing at my dorm, but the school's threatening to kick him out. And I don't know how to help him. The weight of his words settled over me. This wasn't just Ethan's truth, it was a crisis. One he'd been carrying alone. I glanced at the road sign ahead, 200 miles to Flagstaff. We had a long way to go, and not just on this highway. Ethan, I said, my voice steady. We'll figure it out. Together. He looked at me, eyes wide, like he wasn't sure he could believe me. But I meant it. Sarah would have wanted me to step up, to be the father Ethan needed now. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire, I knew this trip was about more than scattering ashes. It was about rebuilding something: trust, family, maybe even love. The desert gave way to pine forests as we climbed toward Flagstaff, the air cooling through the cracked window. Ethan hadn't spoken much since his confession, but the journal stayed open in his lap, pages filled with his tight, slanted handwriting. I wanted to ask more about Caleb, about how long he'd been carrying this, but I didn't push. Not yet. We stopped at a diner just off the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and waitresses who called you Han. Ethan picked at his fries, his eyes darting to his phone every few minutes. Caleb? I asked, nodding at the screen. Yeah, he said, a flush creeping up his neck. He's stressed. The dorm situation's getting worse. I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. What's the deal with the dorm? They can't just kick him out, can they? Ethan sighed, pushing his plate away. They can if he's not enrolled. He couldn't afford tuition after his parents cut him off. He's been sneaking into my room, but someone ratted him out to the RA. I frowned, leaning back in the booth. And you're covering for him? I have to, Ethan said, his voice fierce. He's got nowhere else to go. His parents told him he's dead to them unless he fixes himself. Can you believe that? The words hit like a punch. I thought of Ethan at 9, all skinny limbs and big eyes, scared to trust me after his dad walked out. I'd worked hard to earn that trust, to show him I wasn't going anywhere. The idea of parents turning their back on their kid, it made my blood boil. What's Caleb like? I asked, trying to keep things light. Besides the art thing. Ethan's face softened, a small smile breaking through. He's brave. Braver than me. He came out to his family last year, even though he knew they'd react like that. He's got this laugh. It's like music. You know. Makes everything feel okay for a second. I nodded, picturing a kid with a spark. Someone who'd caught Ethan's heart in a way I hadn't seen before. Sounds like a good guy, I said. But he's in a tough spot. You got any ideas on how to help him? Ethan's smile faded. I've been trying to figure that out. I've got some savings from my summer job, but it's not enough for his tuition. And I can't ask you. Stop right there. I cut in. You're my kid. If you need help, you ask. That's how this works. He looked at me, his eyes searching, like he was waiting for the catch. You don't even know him. Tom. Why would you help? Because you care about him, I said simply. And Sarah would have done the same. Ethan's eyes glistened, and he looked down, blinking fast. I miss her, he whispered. She would have known what to say. She always did. Yeah, I said, my throat tight. She was good at that. We sat in silence for a moment, the clatter of the diner fading into the background. I thought of Sarah, her warm laugh, the way she'd pull Ethan into a hug when he was upset. She'd want me to be that for him now, but I wasn't sure I knew how. Tell you what, I said, leaning forward. Let's get to Flagstaff, find a place to crash, and make a plan. We'll call Caleb, see what he needs. Sound good? Ethan nodded, a spark of hope in his eyes. Yeah. Thanks, Tom. We paid the bill and headed back to the car, the night air crisp and sharp. As we drove, Ethan started really talking about Caleb, about college, about the poetry he'd been writing in that journal. I listened, letting his words fill the space between us. For the first time in months, it felt like we were connecting, like the gap Sarah left wasn't so wide after all. But then his phone buzzed, and his face went pale. It's Caleb, he said, his voice tight. He's in trouble. What kind? I asked, my hands tightening on the wheel. He got caught sneaking into the dorm again. The RA called campus security. They're threatening to press charges. Charges? I said, my voice rising. For what? Crashing on your couch. Trespassing, Ethan said, his voice shaking. He's scared, Tom. He doesn't know what to do. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Okay. Where is he now? Still at the dorm. He's waiting for me to call back. Tell him to sit tight, I said. We're going to help him. But we need to be smart about this. Ethan nodded, his fingers flying over his phone as he texted Caleb. I focused on the road, my mind racing. This trip was supposed to be about closure, about saying goodbye to Sarah. But now it was something bigger, a chance to show Ethan I was in his corner, no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to save another kid who needed it. The motel in Flagstaff was a squat, faded building with a buzzing vacancy sign. Ethan paced the room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent as he talked to Caleb. I sat on the edge of one of the twin beds, the springs creaking under my weight, trying to piece together a plan. He's okay for now, Ethan said, hanging up. The security guard let him off with a warning, but he has to leave the dorm by morning. I nodded, rubbing my jaw. Does he have anywhere to go? Friends? Maybe. Ethan shook his head. Most of his friends are back in California, and he doesn't want to go back there. Not after what his family said. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Okay, let's think this through. Where's he going to school? Northern Arizona University, Ethan said. Same as me. That's how we met. All right, I said. We're close. We could pick him up tomorrow. Bring him with us for a bit. Buy some time to figure out his next steps. Ethan's eyes widened. You do that. Let him come with us. He's important to you, I said. And he's in trouble. Sarah would have dragged him into the car herself. Ethan laughed. A real laugh this time. And it eased the tension in my chest. Yeah, she would have. We spent the next hour mapping out the logistics. Ethan called Caleb back, and I could hear the relief in his voice as he explained the plan. I didn't catch much of Caleb's side of the conversation, but his tone was soft, grateful, and maybe a little wary. I couldn't blame him. He didn't know me, and I was just some guy offering to pick him up in the middle of a crisis. "Tom," Ethan said after he hung up, "Caleb's nervous about meeting you. He thinks you might. I don't know. Judge him." I frowned. Judge him? For what? "For being with me," Ethan said quietly. "For being who he is." The words hit hard. I thought of my own upbringing. The small town where different wasn't a word you wanted attached to you. I'd worked hard to leave that mindset behind, but I knew not everyone did. "Tell him he's got nothing to worry about," I said. "I'm not that guy." Ethan nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wanted to believe me, but he'd spent years hiding this part of himself. Trust wasn't going to come easy. The next morning, we grabbed coffee and hit the road early. The Grand Canyon, our next stop. Ethan was quieter than usual, his knee bouncing as we neared the university. When we pulled up to the dorm, a lanky kid with messy blonde hair and a backpack slung over one shoulder was waiting outside. Caleb. He looked younger than 19, his green eyes scanning the car nervously. Ethan jumped out, and I watched as they hugged. Quick but fierce, like they were anchoring each other. Caleb glanced at me through the windshield, and I gave him a nod, trying to look less intimidating than my 6'2" frame usually made me seem. "Tom, this is Caleb," Ethan said as they climbed into the car. Caleb settled in the back, his backpack at his feet. "Hey," Caleb said, his voice soft but clear. "Thanks for, this." "No problem," I said, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" He shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Been better. But I'm here." We drove toward the Grand Canyon. The conversation light at first music. The weather. The best burgers in Flagstaff. But I could feel the undercurrent. The things left unsaid. Caleb was guarded. His answers short, like he was waiting for me to prove I wasn't what he feared. Ethan kept glancing at him, his worry plain as day. At the canyon's rim, we parked and walked to an overlook. The vastness of it stole my breath, layers of red and gold stretching out forever, carved by time and patience. Ethan and Caleb stood close, their shoulders brushing, and I saw the way Caleb relaxed. Just a little. When Ethan pointed out a hawk circling above. "You ever been here before?" I asked Caleb, trying to break the ice. "Once. When I was a kid," he said. "My parents took me. Back when things were different." I nodded. "Not pushing. It's something, isn't it? Makes you feel small, but in a good way." "Yeah," Caleb said, his voice softer. "Like maybe your problems aren't as big as they seem." We stood there for a while, the three of us, letting the canyon's silence speak for us. I thought about Sarah, how she'd loved places like this, how she'd have wrapped Caleb in a hug and told him he was enough. I wasn't her, but I could try. The road to Colorado was quieter, the weight of the Grand Canyon still lingering. Ethan and Caleb sat in the back together now, their voices low, a mix of whispers and soft laughter. I caught glimpses of them in the rearview mirror, Ethan's hand resting lightly on Caleb's knee, Caleb's head leaning against the window, a faint smile on his face. It was the kind of moment that felt fragile, like it could break if you looked too hard. We stopped at a gas station outside Durango, the air sharp with the scent of pine. While I filled the tank, Ethan and Caleb wandered inside for snacks. I watched them through the glass, the way they moved together, easy and natural. It hit me then Ethan wasn't just telling me he was gay. He was showing me who he loved. And that love was real, as real as what I'd had with Sarah. Back in the car, Caleb spoke up. "Mister, Hey, Tom. Ethan told me about your wife. I'm sorry. I know this trip's important. I glanced at him in the mirror. Thanks, Caleb. And you're part of it now. Sarah would have liked that. He nodded, his expression unreadable. My parents, they wouldn't have. They'd say I'm ruining everything. They're wrong, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You're not ruining anything. You're just living. Caleb looked down, his hands twisting in his lap. I wish it was that simple. It's not, I admitted. But you've got Ethan. And you've got me. For what it's worth. Ethan reached over, squeezing Caleb's hand, and I saw the way Caleb's shoulders relaxed. Just a fraction. We drove on, the Rockies rising in the distance, their peaks dusted with early snow. That night, we camped by a lake Sarah had loved, its surface glassy under the stars. I built a fire while Ethan and Caleb set up the tent, their laughter cutting through the crisp air. After dinner, we sat around the fire, the crackle of wood filling the silence. Caleb, I said, poking at the embers, what's your plan? After this trip, He hesitated, glancing at Ethan. I don't know. I want to go back to school, finish my degree. But without money, there's got to be scholarships, financial aid. I said. You looked into that? A little, he said. But it's hard to focus when you're just trying to survive. Ethan chimed in. I've been helping him look. There's a few art scholarships he could apply for. He's really good. Tom, you should see his paintings. I'd like to, I said, and I meant it. Caleb, you got any of your work with you? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos of vibrant canvases landscapes that felt alive, portraits that held stories in their eyes. These are incredible, I said, handing the phone back. You've got talent. Don't let anyone take that from you. Caleb's cheeks flushed. Thanks. It's all I've got left. You know. No, Ethan said softly. It's not all you've got. The firelight danced on their faces, and I felt like an outsider for a moment, witnessing something private and profound. But then Ethan looked at me, his eyes steady. Tom, I want to use Mom's savings. The money she left me. For Caleb's tuition. I froze, the words sinking in. Sarah had left Ethan a small inheritance, enough to help with college or a start in life. It was a big ask, and I could see the weight of it in Ethan's eyes. That's a lot to give up, I said carefully. You sure about this? I'm sure, Ethan said. Mom would have wanted it. She always said to help people when you can. I looked at Caleb, who was staring into the fire, his jaw tight. Caleb, what do you think? He swallowed hard. I don't want to take Ethan's future. But I don't know what else to do. I nodded, the fire's warmth doing little to ease the ache in my chest. We'll figure it out, I said. But Ethan, we need to talk this through. All of us. The conversation stretched late into the night, the stars bright above us. We talked about option scholarships, part-time jobs, maybe even me pitching in from the shop's profits. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a start. And as I watched Ethan and Caleb lean against each other, their silhouettes soft against the firelight, I felt a flicker of hope. This was what Sarah would have wanted a family, however unconventional, pulling together. The road to Montana wound through mountains, the air growing colder with every mile. Ethan and Caleb took turns driving, giving me a chance to sit in the back and think. Ethan's offer to use Sarah's money for Caleb's tuition kept circling in my mind. It was generous, selfless, but it was also a sacrifice. I wanted to support him, but I needed to know it was the right call. We stopped at a small town in Wyoming for lunch. A diner with checkered floors and a jukebox playing old country tunes. Caleb was quieter today, his eyes shadowed, like the weight of his situation was settling back in. Ethan noticed too, his hand brushing Caleb's under the table, a small gesture of comfort. "Tom," Caleb said as we waited for our burgers, "I don't know how to thank you for letting me come along. For everything." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Just keep being honest with us. That's enough." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was used to rejection, to people turning away when things got hard. I wanted to prove him wrong, but words alone wouldn't do it. Back on the road, Ethan turned on the radio, and a soft ballad filled the car. Caleb hummed along, his voice low and warm, and Ethan grinned, joining in. For a moment, it felt like we were just three people on a road trip, not carrying the weight of grief and uncertainty. But then Caleb's phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, his face paling. "It's my dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to answer," Ethan said, his hand on Caleb's arm. "I know," Caleb said, but he hit accept anyway, putting the phone to his ear. "Dad." I couldn't hear the other side, but Caleb's expression told me enough. Tense, guarded, like he was bracing for a fight. "No, I'm not coming back," he said after a moment. "I told you, I'm not changing who I am." The conversation was short, sharp, and when Caleb hung up, he stared out the window, his hands clenched in his lap. Ethan reached for him, but Caleb pulled away, just slightly. "What did he say?" Ethan asked softly. "He wants me to come home," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Said he'll pay for school if I get help. Like I'm broken or something." "You're not broken," I said, leaning forward. "Don't let him make you feel like you are." Caleb's eyes met mine in the mirror, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of trust. "Thanks," he said, his voice cracking. "But it's hard. You know, hearing that from your own dad." I nodded, thinking of my own father, a man who'd valued toughness over everything else. "Yeah, I know. But you've got people who see you for who you are. Focus on that." We drove in silence for a while, the mountains looming larger. That night, we reached the meadow in Montana, the place Sarah had wanted her ashes scattered. It was just as she'd described, wide and green, framed by peaks, with wildflowers dotting the grass. We set up camp, and as the sun set, we stood in the meadow, the urn in my hands. Ethan's eyes were wet, and Caleb stood close, his arm around Ethan's waist. "She'd love this," Ethan said, his voice thick. "She always said this place felt like home." I nodded, unable to speak. I opened the urn, and we scattered the ashes together, watching them drift on the breeze. It was quiet, sacred, and for a moment, it felt like Sarah was there with us. After, we sat by the fire, the stars bright above. Caleb spoke up, his voice steady. "I want to go back to school. Not for my dad, but for me. For my art." Ethan smiled, squeezing his hand. "We'll make it happen." I looked at them, my heart full. "We will," I said. "Whatever it takes." The meadow held us, a place of endings and beginnings. And I knew this was only the start of something new. The drive back south was different, lighter somehow, like scattering Sarah's ashes had lifted a weight. Ethan and Caleb were more open now, sharing stories about college, their friends, the open mic nights where they'd first connected. I listened, soaking it in, grateful for the glimpse into Ethan's world. But the question of Caleb's future still hung over us. We stopped in a small Colorado town to grab coffee and use the library's Wi-Fi to research scholarships. Ethan and Caleb hunched over a laptop, scrolling through applications, while I called a buddy who worked at a community college, asking about financial aid options. "You're really going all in on this," Caleb said later, as we ate sandwiches at a picnic table outside. "Why?" I shrugged, wiping mustard off my hands. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because Ethan believes in you." Caleb looked at Ethan, his eyes soft. "I don't deserve him." Ethan laughed, nudging him. "Shut up. You totally do." I smiled, but my mind was on the logistics. Scholarships were a long shot, deadlines had passed, and competition was fierce. Ethan's savings could help, but it wouldn't cover everything. I'd been turning over an idea, one I hadn't shared yet. The shop was doing okay, not great, but enough that I could take out a loan, maybe cover a semester for Caleb. It was a risk, but it felt right. That night, we stayed at a cheap motel, the kind with thin walls and a vending machine that ate your quarters. Ethan and Caleb shared a bed, their voices low as they talked late into the night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah. She'd always said family wasn't just blood, it was the people you chose to stand by. Caleb was part of that now, whether he knew it or not. The next morning, I brought it up over breakfast. "Caleb, I've been thinking. The shop's got some breathing room. I could take out a loan, help with your tuition for a semester, give you a chance to get back on your feet." Caleb's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "But it's not a free ride. You need to keep your grades up. Maybe work part-time at the shop when you're not in class." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Tom, that's amazing." Caleb shook his head, his expression torn. "I can't let you do that. It's too much." "It's not," I said. "It's an investment. In you. In Ethan's happiness. In what Sarah would have wanted." Caleb looked down, his hands trembling. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," I said. "Just keep painting. Make something beautiful." We hit the road again, the mood lighter but still tinged with uncertainty. Caleb was quiet, processing, but I caught him smiling at Ethan, a real smile that reached his eyes. It felt like progress. By the time we reached New Mexico, we'd settled into a rhythm, driving, talking, planning. Ethan and Caleb worked on scholarship applications at every stop, and I made calls to the shop, setting things up for when we got back. But then Ethan's phone buzzed with a text that made his face go pale. "It's from Caleb's mom," he said, showing Caleb the screen. Caleb read it, his jaw tightening. "She wants to meet. Says she's sorry. Wants to talk." "Do you believe her?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I don't know," Caleb said. "She didn't stand up for me when Dad kicked me out. Why now?" Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe she's had a change of heart. Or maybe she just misses you." Caleb shook his head. "I'm not ready to see her. Not yet." "Fair enough," I said. "You call the shots. We're here for you." As we drove into the night, the stars bright above, I felt the weight of what we were building, a family. Not perfect, but real. And I knew, no matter what came next, we'd face it together. Back in Arizona, the desert heat greeted us like an old friend. We were nearing the end of the trip, and the reality of what came next was settling in. Caleb had a few scholarship applications submitted, and I'd started the paperwork for a loan. But the text from his mom lingered, a shadow over our progress. We stopped at a roadside cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and homemade pie. Caleb stared at his phone, the message from his mom still unanswered. Ethan sat close, his hand resting lightly on Caleb's back. "You don't have to decide now," Ethan said. "But maybe it's worth hearing her out." Caleb shook his head, his voice low. "What if it's a trap? What if she's just trying to get me back to Dad?" I leaned forward, setting my coffee down. "If you decide to meet her, we'll go with you. You won't be alone." Caleb looked at me, his eyes searching. "You'd do that?" "Of course I would," I said. "You're part of this now. We don't leave family hanging." He nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Okay, I'll think about it." That night, we camped under the stars again, the desert sky vast and clear. Ethan and Caleb sat close, sharing a blanket, their voices soft as they talked about the future. I watched from a distance, giving them space, but close enough to feel like I was part of it. The next day, Caleb made his decision. "I'll meet her," he said as we packed up the campsite. "But only if you guys come with me." Ethan grinned, pulling him into a hug. "We've got you." I nodded, proud of them both. "Where's she at?" "Phoenix," Caleb said. "She's staying at a hotel there." We drove back to the city, the skyline familiar but different now, colored by everything we'd been through. Caleb was quiet, his knee bouncing as we pulled into the hotel parking lot. Ethan squeezed his hand, and I gave him a reassuring nod. Caleb's mom, Linda, was waiting in the lobby, a petite woman with tired eyes and a nervous smile. She stood when she saw us, her hands twisting together. "Caleb," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so glad you came." Caleb stayed close to Ethan, his posture stiff. "Why now, Mom?" She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong. I should have stood up for you. I miss you." I watched Caleb's face, saw the conflict, their hope warring with hurt. "You let Dad kick me out," he said, his voice raw. "You didn't say anything." "I know," she said, tears spilling over. "I was scared. But I'm here now. I want to make this right." Ethan's hand tightened on Caleb's, a silent anchor. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "Linda, I'm Tom, Ethan's stepdad. Caleb's been through a lot. If you're serious about this, you need to show him, not just say it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I'm trying. I've left your father. Caleb, I'm starting over. I want you in my life, if you'll have me." Caleb's eyes widened, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then he stepped forward, hesitant, and hugged her. It was quick, awkward, but it was a start. We spent the afternoon talking, Linda listening as Caleb told her about his art, his life with Ethan, his dreams. She didn't have all the answers, but she was trying, and that was something. As we left the hotel, Caleb looked lighter, like a burden had lifted. "Thanks," he said to me and Ethan, "for being there." "Always," Ethan said, and I nodded, my heart full. The final leg of the trip took us back to Phoenix, to the house that still felt too empty without Sarah. But it wasn't just her absence that defined it. No, it was the new family we were building. Caleb moved into the spare room, and we worked together to get him back into school. The loan came through, and with Ethan's savings and a small scholarship Caleb landed, he enrolled for the next semester. One evening, a few weeks later, I found Ethan and Caleb in the backyard, painting together on a canvas Caleb had set up. The colors were bold, vibrant, A mix of their styles, Ethan's careful lines blending with Caleb's wild strokes. I watched from the porch, a beer in hand, feeling a peace I hadn't known in months. Ethan looked up, catching my eye. "You okay, Tom?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Just thinking about your mom. She'd be proud of you. Both of you." Caleb set his brush down, his expression soft. "I wish I'd met her. She'd have loved you," I said, and I meant it. Sarah had a way of seeing people, really seeing them, and she'd have seen the good in Caleb, the strength in Ethan. That night, Ethan showed me his journal, the one he'd been clutching the whole trip. The pages were filled with poems, some about Sarah, some about Caleb, some about the road. One line stuck with me: "Truth is a long drive, but love is the destination." We weren't done yet. There were still challenges. Caleb's relationship with his mom was fragile, and money was tight. But we were together, and that was enough. The next morning, I hung one of Caleb's paintings in the living room, a landscape of the Grand Canyon, its colors alive with memory. Ethan stood beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "Thanks, Tom," he said, "for everything." I pulled him into a hug, rough and quick, like always. "You're my kid," I said. "That's what I'm here for." As we stood there, Caleb joined us, his arm around Ethan's waist. The house felt full again, not with Sarah's presence, but with something new: hope, family, love. And I knew, wherever she was, Sarah was smiling.